My name is Michelle Adams. I'm 36 years old, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago. What I'm about to tell you happened 2 years ago, just days before Christmas in December 2023. And even now, when the house is quiet at night, I still hear it, the sound of my daughter breathing in fear on a sofa that was never meant to be her bed. That night, around 3 a.m., I came home earlier than planned. At the time, I was working as a long haul truck driver for a shipping company. My routes often kept me away for 5 to 15 days at a time, crossing state lines, sleeping in rest stops, counting the hours until I could come home. That trip was supposed to last one more day, but things went smoothly, too smoothly. So I drove through the night. I didn't pull into the driveway. I didn't want to wake anyone. I parked outside the gate, unlocked the door quietly, and stepped into my own house like a stranger. All I could think about was Aubrey. My daughter was 80 years old then. She was everything I had left after my husband passed away 3 years earlier. Every mile I drove, every night I spent alone in that truck, was for her. I imagined walking into her room, watching her sleep, kissing her cheek. But the first thing I saw wasn't her bedroom. It was the living room. Under the dim streetlight coming through the window, I saw a small figure curled up on the sofa. At first, my mind scrambled for excuses. Maybe my parents had an argument. Maybe someone had guests. Then I stepped closer, and my heart stopped. It was Aubrey. My 8-year-old daughter was lying on the sofa, wrapped in a thin blanket, her body curled tight like she was trying to disappear into herself. Her lips were pale. Even in her sleep, her face looked afraid. I turned on the light. She was shivering. I picked her up instantly. Aubrey, Mommy's home. Her eyes flew open. The moment she recognized me, she broke. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered through tears, "Mom, you're back. I missed you." Her tiny body was shaking in my arms. I held her like I was afraid she might vanish. Something was wrong, very wrong. I gently set her back down and told her to wait for me. Then, at 3 in the morning, I started knocking on doors. Hard. "Mom, Dad, get up now." My father came out first, annoyed, half asleep. My mother followed, eyes uneasy. Then my sister Barbara stepped out of her room. She frowned at me and snapped, "Lower your voice. Alice is sleeping." That was when I asked the question that changed everything. "Why is your daughter sleeping in my daughter's room?" Barbara froze for half a second. Then she smiled. "Sit down, Michelle. Let's talk calmly." I sat. My parents avoided my eyes. Barbara crossed her arms. I looked at all of them and asked slowly, "Why is my daughter sleeping on the sofa?" And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't recognize the people sitting in front of me. Barbara answered first, like she'd rehearsed it. "Alice is sick," she said, rubbing her eyes dramatically. "She needs her own room to rest. Just for a few days." A few days? I stared at her, waiting for my parents to correct her, to add some detail that made it make sense. They didn't, so I asked the only question that mattered. "Then why didn't you give Alice your room?" My voice was quiet, but it had an edge. "Why didn't you sleep on the sofa?" Barbara shrugged, like I'd asked why the sky was blue. "Oh, I wanted to," she said lightly, "but Aubrey offered. She said she preferred the sofa. This was her decision. I didn't force her." I felt something cold slide down my spine. No 8-year-old chooses a freezing couch over their own warm bed in December. Not unless they're scared. I turned to Aubrey. She was perched in the corner of the sofa, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around a pillow like it was armor. Her eyes kept flicking toward my parents, then toward Barbara, and then away again. I softened my voice because she was my baby, and I could already feel her trembling. "Aubrey," I said gently. "Sweetheart, is what Aunt Barbara said true?" Aubrey hesitated, just for a second. But in that second, I saw it. Barbara's face hardened. Her eyes narrowed, and she shot Aubrey a look so sharp it could have cut glass. A warning. A command. Aubrey's shoulders tightened. Her lips parted, then closed again, like the truth was stuck behind her teeth. Finally, she stammered, barely audible. Yes, Aunt Barbara is right. I prefer sleeping on the sofa, so I gave my room to Alice." My heart didn't just ache. It shattered. Because I'd heard my daughter lie before. Little kid lies. Harmless ones. This wasn't that. This was the voice of a child who had been trained, conditioned. And the worst part? She wasn't lying to get something. She was lying to survive. I scooted closer, wrapping my arm around her. I wanted her to feel the warmth of me, the safety of me, the certainty. "Aubrey," I whispered into her hair, "look at me." Slowly her eyes lifted. They were glossy, wide, overwhelmed. "You have me here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. No one can hurt you while I'm home. You understand?" She nodded, but it was the kind of nod that didn't reach her soul. I tried again, softer. Tell me the truth. Before she could even breathe, my mother cut in. Michelle, you're going too far, she snapped, like I was the problem. Aubrey willingly gave her room to her cousin. That's a good thing. It shows she knows how to share. You should be proud. My father nodded, arms crossed, voice thick with irritation. You come home and start yelling at everyone at 3 in the morning. It's a small thing. Aubrey is fine. Fine. I stared at him, then at my mother. Fine? My voice shook now, not from fear, but from rage I was trying to leash. She's 8. It's freezing. Even if she offered, why would any adult in this house allow her to sleep out here? My mother sighed dramatically, rubbing her forehead like I was a headache. She wanted it that way, she said. She's stubborn. What were we supposed to do? Fight her? Barbara's face twisted into something performative. Hurt, betrayed, offended. Do you not trust me? She asked, voice trembling in a way that sounded practiced. I'm your sister, Michelle. Why would I force Aubrey onto the sofa? What kind of person do you think I am? My father's tone sharpened. You spoil that child too much, he said, and now you're tearing this family apart. My mother added, eyes wet as if she were the victim. That's right. You don't even ask how we are. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? Something inside me went very still. I didn't care about their feelings. I didn't care about their pride. I didn't care about their version of family. Because my daughter was shivering beside me, and her eyes looked like a door someone had locked from the outside. I pulled Aubrey closer, my hand stroking her hair with slow, steady motions. Aubrey, I said, gentle but firm, you remember what I always taught you? She nodded faintly. What did I say about telling the truth? Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Her eyes flicked again toward Barbara, like she needed permission, like she was waiting for approval to breathe. That realization hit me like a punch. They hadn't just lied to me. They had mentally controlled my child. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. Aubrey, I whispered, voice cracking, if you lie, your dad in heaven will be so sad. The room went quiet. My daughter's eyes widened, and then tears spilled out like something finally broke loose. I don't want Dad to be sad, she sobbed. I don't want Dad to cry, Mom. My heart twisted so violently it felt physical. I held her tighter, letting her cry into my shoulder, letting the fear pour out of her in shaking waves. When she finally calmed, just a little, I cupped her face. Then tell me the truth, I murmured. I promise you, no one can hurt you when I'm here. Aubrey took a shaky breath. Then she nodded. Yes, she whispered. I'll tell you. Barbara moved immediately. Her body snapped forward like a trap being sprung. Her eyes locked onto Aubrey with pure threat, and her voice rose. What other truth is there? She barked. You already offered to give up your room for Alice. Remember, Aubrey? Aubrey flinched hard, pressing into me, and that was it. The leash inside me snapped. I whipped my head toward Barbara, voice low and lethal. Shut up! Barbara froze. Even my parents went still. I stared at all of them, one by one, until the air in the room felt thin. I'm not asking any more, I said, voice icy. You will not interrupt my daughter again. Then I turned back to Aubrey, stroking her hair with trembling fingers. Go on, I whispered. I'm listening. Aubrey swallowed, eyes wet, voice tiny, but determined. She told me I had to, Aubrey said, pointing a trembling finger toward Barbara. She said, I had to give my room to Alice. Barbara scoffed, but I shot her a look that made her swallow her words. Aubrey kept going, tears rolling down her cheeks. When I said no, she got mad, Aubrey whispered. She said if I didn't do it, she would take me to the place where homeless people sleep. My stomach dropped. Aubrey's voice shook. She said she would leave me there, she whispered, and you wouldn't find me, and I'd have to live outside forever. My vision blurred. I could barely breathe. That wasn't discipline. That wasn't a scare tactic. That was psychological cruelty aimed at an 8-year-old child. Barbara tried to cut in, voice shrill. She's lying. She's making it up. You're really going to believe a child over your own sister? My mother joined her instantly, like they were a team. Kids have big imaginations, she snapped. Don't be fooled. My father didn't speak, but his eyes were on Aubrey, like she was the problem. I felt something dark bloom in my chest. I straightened, holding Aubrey tighter, and my voice came out like steel. I forbid you to interrupt again. Silence slammed into the room. Aubrey wiped at her tears with her sleeve. Grandma and Grandpa knew, she whispered. They told me to listen to Aunt Barbara. They said Alice needed the room more. I looked at my parents. My mother's face twitched. My father stared at the floor. And just when I thought I'd heard the worst, Aubrey leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper like she was afraid the walls would tell on her. Mom, she breathed into my ear, Aunt Barbara has a boyfriend. My body went rigid. What? I whispered, sure I'd misunderstood. Aubrey nodded, eyes terrified. He sleeps in her room, she whispered. Every night. I saw him. For a moment, the world stopped. The air felt thick. My skin went cold. And suddenly, everything made sense. Alice wasn't sick. Aubrey didn't offer. My daughter was pushed onto the sofa because Barbara wanted privacy, because she wanted a room to herself, to play house with a grown man under my roof while my child froze in the dark. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking, my voice barely controlled. Barbara's face changed, just for a second. Panic flashed through her eyes. I didn't say another word. I turned, and I started walking toward Barbara's room. The moment I took that first step toward Barbara's room, she panicked. Her face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, rushing ahead of me. She threw herself in front of the bedroom door, arms spread wide like she was guarding something precious. "This is my room. You can't just barge in. This is a woman's room." I stopped inches from her. For a second, we just stared at each other. Her eyes were wild, desperate. And in that instant, I knew, without a shred of doubt, that my daughter was telling the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply reached out, placed my hand on Barbara's shoulder, and pushed her aside. She wasn't expecting it. She stumbled, lost her balance, and hit the floor with a sharp cry. My mother screamed my name. My father jumped to his feet. I didn't look back. I opened the door. The room was dark. Too dark. I flipped the light switch. The overhead light flooded the space, and my eyes scanned the room in seconds. The bed was a mess. Sheets tangled, pillows scattered. There were 2 cups on the nightstand. 2. My heart pounded. I stepped farther in. Closet. I yanked it open. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. Then my gaze dropped to the shadow beneath the bed. I bent down, and there he was, a grown man, curled up under my bed like a scared animal. His eyes were wide with panic. His beard was unkempt, his hair greasy, his whole body tense like he was bracing for impact. For a second, none of us moved. Then something inside me exploded. "Get out," I said, my voice low and shaking with fury. "Get out from under my bed right now." He hesitated. I took a step closer. "If you don't move," I snapped, "you'll regret it." That was enough. Slowly, awkwardly, he crawled out. He stood up, avoided my eyes, and muttered something I couldn't hear. I wanted to hit him. God, I wanted to. But I didn't, because Aubrey was watching. And I refused to let her see me become someone she'd be afraid of. "Go to the living room," I said coldly. "Now." He obeyed. When we walked back into the living room, the scene was chaos. Barbara was sobbing on the floor. My mother was crying, hands shaking. My father sat frozen in his chair, face pale, like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Aubrey stood in the corner, watching everything with wide, terrified eyes. The man stopped in the middle of the room, head down. Barbara rushed to him, grabbing his arm like he was her lifeline. "I'm sorry," she cried, looking at me with pleading eyes. "I'll explain everything. Please don't hurt him. He's my boyfriend." Boyfriend. The word made my stomach churn. I didn't respond. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Barbara's eyes locked onto it. "No, no, no, no," she screamed. "What are you doing? Don't call the police." My mother rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. "Michelle, please," she begged. "Calm down. We can handle this as a family. There's no need to involve the police." My father finally found his voice. It shook. "Think carefully," he said. "If you do this, this family will lose all its face." I looked at all of them. At my sister who threatened my child. At my parents who knew and stayed silent. At the man who slept comfortably while my daughter froze on a couch. Then I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I didn't hesitate. "There's a stranger in my house," I said steadily. "I need officers immediately." Barbara screamed. My mother collapsed into a chair. My father buried his face in his hands. I hung up and walked straight to Aubrey. I knelt down, wrapped her in my arms, and whispered into her hair, my voice breaking despite myself. "I've got you," I said. "I promise. No one will ever hurt you again." She clung to me like she was afraid I might disappear. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. 2 officers, 1 male, 1 female, stepped into the living room. They listened while I explained everything. They questioned the man who fumbled for his ID. His name was Marcus, 36 years old, unemployed. They took him and Barbara in for questioning. As they escorted her out, Barbara turned back and looked at me. There was no apology in her eyes, only hatred. I didn't flinch. I stood there holding my daughter and watched them leave. That night, as we waited for the house to finally fall silent again, memories crashed over me like a wave. 3 years ago, my husband had died after a long illness. Aubrey was only 5. I became her mother and her father overnight. That same year, my parents lost their house. The pandemic destroyed their small business. They came to me with nowhere else to go. I had hesitated, but my mother promised she'd help with Aubrey, promised family support, promised safety. So I opened my home. Then, a year later, Barbara showed up. Divorced, disgraced, dragging a child who wasn't even her husband's. She cried. She begged. She said it was temporary. I gave up my own bedroom for her. I slept on the sofa after long trips. I sacrificed. And this was how they repaid me, by turning my home into a nightmare for my child. As I sat there holding Aubrey in the quiet aftermath, one thought repeated itself over and over in my mind. They didn't just cross a line, they destroyed it. And I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Aubrey curled up on that sofa, small, cold, trying to make herself invisible in her own home. When the sky finally lightened outside, there was a knock at the door. It was barely 9 a.m. A woman stood there in a navy business suit, hair pulled back tight, eyes serious but not unkind. She introduced herself as a Child Protective Services caseworker. My heart sank and at the same time steeled itself. I let her in. She sat on the sofa, the same sofa Aubrey had slept on for months. When she asked to speak with my daughter alone, Aubrey looked at me first. I nodded. "I'm right here," I said. "You're safe." Aubrey sat across from her, hands folded in her lap, eyes still swollen from crying. At first, her voice was quiet, careful, but then the words started coming. She told her everything, about the cold nights, about being told to lie, about the threats, about the man in Aunt Barbara's room. And then she said something that made my knees nearly give out. "It's been happening for almost 3 months," Aubrey whispered. 3 months. 3 months of fear. 3 months of manipulation. 3 months of my child being pushed aside, literally. I felt sick. The CPS worker's face hardened as she took notes. When she finished, she thanked Aubrey gently and told her she'd done the right thing. After she left, I sat on the floor and cried for the first time since my husband died. Not loud, just silent, broken tears. Because I hadn't known. And they had made sure I didn't. That same afternoon, I called an old friend of mine, a lawyer I'd known since high school. I told him everything. He came over that evening with a briefcase and a look on his face I'd never seen before. He laid the papers on the table. "According to state law," he said calmly, "this is an eviction notice, 30 days. Barbara exploded. "You can't do this," she screamed. "I'm your sister. Alice needs a place to live." My mother stood up, eyes red, hands shaking. "Michelle," she begged, "we're old. You can't throw us out like this. Where are we supposed to go?" My father said nothing. He just stared at the floor. I looked at them, at the people who watched my daughter suffer. "This is the price," I said quietly, "for what you did, and for what you didn't stop." They cried, they begged. I felt nothing, because my heart had gone numb the moment I saw Aubrey on that sofa. What none of us expected was what came next. 2 days later, the CPS worker returned with court documents. The investigation had escalated. A temporary restraining order was issued against my parents and Barbara, effective immediately. They were not allowed anywhere near Aubrey, and because this was our home, they had to leave that same day. No 30 days, no discussion, no second chances. I watched them pack in silence. Barbara cried loudly, dragging her suitcase toward the door. Alice followed her, confused, clutching a stuffed animal. My parents walked behind them slowly. At the door, my mother turned back. Her eyes were red and burning. "You'll regret this," she said. I didn't answer. I just held my daughter and watched them leave. Or forgive them for that. 15 days later, we were sitting in a courtroom that smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. Aubrey's hand was in mine, small and warm. I held it tighter than necessary, not because she needed it, but because I did. Barbara sat across the aisle, her makeup uneven, her posture rigid. My parents were beside her, older than I remembered, smaller somehow. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at Aubrey. The prosecutor laid it all out. The threats, the lies, the psychological control, the months of silence. Aubrey didn't have to testify again. Her CPS interview had been enough. Enough proof, enough truth. When the judge finally spoke, the room went completely still. Barbara was found guilty of child emotional abuse. Her sentence, 3 years of probation and a $40,000 fine, covering damages and mandatory psychological treatment for my daughter. My parents were charged as accomplices, not for what they did, but for what they knowingly allowed. They received 1 year of probation. And then came the part that mattered most to me. A restraining order. No contact with Aubrey, no visits, no phone calls, no messages, until she turned 18. 10 years. When the judge finished reading the verdict, my mother broke down crying. My father called my name, his voice cracking. I didn't turn around. I stood up, took Aubrey's hand, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside, the air felt lighter. Colder, but cleaner. My lawyer friend caught up to me and sighed. "This is the maximum penalty under the law," he said gently. "I know it doesn't feel like enough." It didn't. A part of me wanted prison, wanted them to hurt the way my daughter had hurt. But another part of me knew something else mattered more. Freedom. Safety. Finality. That was the day I stopped being someone's daughter and became only someone's mother. 2 years have passed since that night. 2 years since I found my daughter, sleeping on a sofa in the cold, and realized that the people I trusted most were the ones I needed to protect her from. Our lives look very different now. Not perfect, but peaceful. I quit my long-haul trucking job less than 6 months after everything happened. The pay cut was brutal. I won't lie about that. There were nights I stared at my bank account and wondered if I'd made a mistake. But then I'd hear Aubrey laugh in the next room, and I knew I hadn't. Now I wake her up every morning. I make her breakfast. I drive her to school and pick her up in the afternoon. I cook dinner every night, even when I'm exhausted, because those small routines are the things I missed for so long. Aubrey is 10 years old now. She still has nightmares sometimes, nights where she wakes up crying, asking if she's going to be sent away. But she's healing. She sees a psychologist regularly, and her doctor says she's making real progress. She's laughing more, trusting more, living like a child again, instead of someone always bracing for the next threat. That's everything to me. As for my parents and my sister, they've paid their price. My parents couldn't find another place to live after they were forced out. They ended up in a homeless shelter. Barbara and Alice moved into a rundown apartment in a rough part of the city. The fine left Barbara financially wrecked. 2 part-time jobs just to survive. Sometimes distant relatives reach out. They tell me I went too far. They say I'm heartless, ungrateful, that I abandoned my parents when they needed me most. They remind me that family is family. I listen, and then I remember my daughter, shivering in the dark. So I ask you honestly, if protecting your child means cutting off your parents, if choosing safety over blood makes you the villain, would you still do it? Because I would. Every single time.